In the relentless world of television, nothing is real. Massive spotlights blind you. The atmosphere is tense, artificial, and right there, someone asks you to be yourself, to ignore the cameras. It's an almost impossible request, especially when you know a single mistake can create an unforgettable TV moment. Because, let's face it, there's something in human nature that enjoys other people's drama. In 1995, Princess Diana took one of the biggest risks for a public figure. She sat down for a Panorama interview that would change everything. It was as if a bomb had exploded right in the middle of the royal family. But for years, the story behind the interview, the how and the why, was a secret. A plot worthy of a spy novel, shrouded in mystery by journalist Martin Bashir. In this video, we are going to hear the voices closest to Diana to understand her true motivation. Was Diana a master strategist who used television to control the narrative? Or was she a woman manipulated by a system she didn't understand? She believed the British intelligence services were watching her. The result was a conversation that forever destroyed the fairy tale and lit the fuse of a tragedy that never stopped. In the world of televised interviews, nothing is normal. The atmosphere is never relaxed. Every aspect of it feels artificial. You become hyper-aware of everything around you. Huge door-sized lights are pointed directly at your face. And yet, someone still asks you to ignore the camera, an almost impossible request. Unexpected things can happen during an interview. Questions are asked that you're not prepared for, and a single mistake can create an unforgettable TV moment. Because mistakes make for great television, there's something in human nature that enjoys the drama of others, a twisted sort of delight as a tragedy looms. In 1995, Princess Diana took one of the biggest risks a public figure can take. She sat down for an interview that would change everything. At 19, you think you're ready for anything, but the pressure of marrying into the royal family was immense. That interview became an extraordinary piece of television. Almost every sentence left the world stunned. The candid conversation shattered the fairy tale forever. It was as if a bomb had gone off in the middle of the royal family, but for years the story behind the interview remained a secret. The journalist Martin Bashir wrapped the process in a shroud of mystery. It felt like something out of a John le Carré spy novel. Now, we'll hear from BBC insiders and investigative journalists. We'll also hear from the people closest to Diana to understand why the princess agreed to that interview. She believed British intelligence was watching her, that she was a constant target. We'll investigate whether Diana had more control than anyone suspected. The princess even confessed that Martin had coached her on how to answer the questions. We will discover how the interview transformed Diana's personal life and how it changed the culture of Great Britain itself. We saw the modern 20th century woman finally speaking her mind, and how that act lit the fuse of a tragedy. The press went wild. It became a snowball that would never stop. The princess started that day by going to the gym. She seemed to be in a good mood, unconcerned by the media storm, a storm her interview had unleashed. To some, her decision was reckless. She didn't have to do it. She seemed like a sad and very confused young woman. In her own words, she expressed a wish. "I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country." A year later, the princess confessed she regretted that line. She thought it sounded a bit cheesy. Some believe she didn't think through the consequences, but others hold a very different view. They claim she was keenly aware of what she was doing. She joined the royal family as a fragile, shy teenage bride, but she grew and matured into a strong woman. The interview was a demonstration of that strength. It was a calculated decision by Diana to tell her side of the story. It was a very shrewd move. The interview with the Panorama program was the result of years of built-up frustration. Frustrations Diana had held on to for more than a decade. To understand how it all culminated in that moment, we have to go back. We have to return to one of her first appearances on camera. At 3 o'clock, Prince Charles and Lady Diana appeared in public. It was the first time the world saw her sapphire and diamond ring. At the time, their engagement interview was seen as the start of a fairy tale. But after the Panorama interview, those images took on a different tone. Even Diana's father commented that she would make a good housewife. Vidisha, a filmmaker and journalist, analyzes those early appearances. She sees an intelligent woman struggling with her role and fighting against the mocking condescension of many interviewers. A key question defined that engagement. And I suppose in love? Charles's response was devastating. Whatever in love means. For any woman, that phrase is a red flag. Dickie Arbiter, former spokesman for Buckingham Palace, offers his perspective. He believes the Prince of Wales was embarrassed to admit he was in love. He argues you can't blame the man, as he wasn't brought up to show emotion. But the truth was simpler. He was in a loving relationship with someone else. By the mid-'80s, Charles's romance with Camilla Parker Bowles was an open secret. However, television documentaries kept the fantasy alive. Hosts like Alistair Burnett projected the image of a perfect couple. Richard Kay was the royal correspondent for the Daily Mail during those years. He wrote extensively about Diana, and over time, they became friends. Kay describes the royal journalism of the era as reverential, like something out of the 1950s. In those documentaries, Diana was asked about her role. She would reply that her duty was to support her husband and, most importantly, to be a mother and a wife. These documentaries offered a nostalgic ideal of the nuclear family, a popular idea when John Major came to power in 1990. Major spoke of returning to basic values, of accepting responsibility for yourself and your family. His vision of England was a conservative one, the idea of a Little Britain where nothing changes, where the nuclear family was a life goal. But the other side of that coin was the marriage that doesn't work, the single mother, the divorcee. In the 90s, this carried a great stigma. For Diana, the national fantasy of the obedient wife had become a trap. In June 1992, she made her first attempt to break free. A book went on sale exposing the damage her marriage had caused. Diana had secretly collaborated with the writer Andrew Morton through an intermediary, but many suspected her involvement. The palace was furious. The Queen believed that you don't show emotion in the monarchy. Far from freeing her, Morton's book tightened her chains. The royal family shut her out. From 1992, Diana lived alone in Kensington Palace, separated but not divorced. All her media engagements were controlled by the palace. She was trapped in a royal limbo, but it was a move by her husband that gave her an idea. The main motivation for Diana's interview was the one Charles gave a year earlier. She was struck by the frankness of that conversation. Charles admitted his infidelity on national television. "Were you faithful and honorable to your wife?" he was asked. He replied, "Yes," until it became irretrievably broken down. Diana saw in that interview a frankness she admired, and she began to wonder if she should do something similar. After more than a decade, Diana's frustrations had boiled over. After the book failed to set her free, she realized something. Only the immediacy of television would liberate her. It was part of a war. The Panorama interview was a missile aimed at the establishment. Paul Burrell, Diana's butler, recounted a key memory. In October 1995, the princess asked him to carry out a secret mission. He was to pick someone up in White City, and no one could know. Burrell went to get Martin Bashir. He hid him in the back seat of the car, covered with a blanket. Bashir was thrilled, like a child on an adventure. By then, the princess had few friends left. Now she had managed to contact someone from the BBC, someone who could advise her on the media. That relationship would lead to a historic interview. In the mid-90s, Diana was an outsider in the monarchy. They watched her every move, fearing she would speak out against the future king again. But in the summer of '95, a crack appeared in the royal fortress. Richard Eyre, head of editorial policy at the BBC, was in a routine meeting. As he was leaving, Panorama's editor, Steve Hewlett, mentioned something. He said that Martin Bashir, a reporter for the show, wanted to interview Princess Diana. Eyre admitted that if he had thought about who could land that scoop, Bashir would have been the last person on his list. Martin Bashir was a small fish in the big pond of the BBC. He had worked as a journalist covering musicians, but he wasn't well known. No one imagined Diana would agree to be interviewed by him. She received countless requests from the most famous journalists in the world. She often had lunch with Clive James, David Frost, and Barbara Walters. Walters, the queen of interviewers, also tried. She wrote to Diana, offering her services if she ever decided to speak. Was Diana a master strategist who chose an unknown journalist to control the narrative, or was she manipulated by a system she didn't understand? Let us know your theory in the comments. Investigative journalist Chris Blackhurst shed light on the mystery. Shortly after the interview, the story of how it came about exploded. Bashir's colleagues at the BBC suspected something wasn't right. According to Blackhurst's investigation, Bashir first met with Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. The pretext was a documentary about state surveillance of the royal family. Earl Spencer was already wary of the security services. He felt that he and his family were being watched. Martin Bashir began to feed this suspicion. With every step, he realized he was getting closer to the grand prize, a face-to-face interview with Diana. It was then that Bashir made a bold claim. He said that a source in the intelligence services had confirmed to him that the princess was being monitored. Diana already lived with that feeling. She had pried up floorboards and unscrewed telephones looking for listening devices. This fear was not unfounded. 3 years earlier, the Sun newspaper had revealed a secret phone recording. It was an allegedly intimate conversation between Diana and her friend James Gilby. It was suspected that the security services had recorded and leaked it. Although the government denied it, the doubt lingered. Martin Bashir may have played on Diana's fears. The situation became even more complicated after the interview. It came to light that Bashir had presented forged documents. He went to a graphic artist to fake bank statements. These documents showed payments from a mysterious offshore company. The recipient was Charles Spencer's former head of security. Suspicions grew. It was thought that Bashir used these documents to fuel the fears of the princess and her brother. The idea was that the security services were paying for information about them. After the interview, the BBC launched an internal investigation. They didn't deny the documents were forged, but they claimed the interview was secured without using them. Diana confirmed she had never seen the fake documents, and Bashir was exonerated. However, many were not convinced. The question remained, why go to such lengths? Forging a bank statement was a crime. But many believe another factor was key. The Diana that many knew wanted to do that program. She was going to do it with or without forged documents. Secrecy was the key. Martin didn't follow the official path to get a royal interview. The princess believed that any official request would never reach her. Attempts by famous journalists, filtered through the palace, always failed. Martin was stealthy. No one knew him, and that was his greatest asset. He wasn't a celebrity. The only celebrity in the room would be Diana. After weeks of secret meetings, the negotiations bore fruit. At the end of October, things moved quickly. Secrecy was now the biggest problem for the BBC. How do you keep the world's most sensational scoop a secret? The princess warned that if the palace found out, they would find a way to stop her. It was decided to work on a need-to-know basis. At first, only a small circle of senior BBC executives was aware. John Burt, the Director General, approved the interview. Burt was a modernizer, and many disagreed with his management style, but he was a very good journalist. However, above Burt was someone who would not support it. The chairman of the BBC governors was Marmaduke Hussey. Hussey was an establishment figure appointed by Margaret Thatcher. He embodied a traditional and reverential vision of the BBC. This created tension with the modernizer, John Burt. Plus, there was another problem. Hussey's wife, Lady Susan Hussey, was the Queen's lady-in-waiting. It was obvious she would inform the palace. The day John Burt approved the interview, he made two decisions. One was to allow it, the other was not to tell his chairman. That decision destroyed their relationship forever. It was a pivotal moment in the history of the BBC, a declaration of independence. The date chosen was November 5th, 1995. The location, Kensington Palace, right under the noses of the royal family. Paul Burrell recalled that on that Sunday the princess suggested he take the day off. He found it strange. To get past security, the BBC team came up with a cover story. The princess introduced them as technicians who were coming to install a new stereo system. To ensure secrecy, the crew was reduced to 3 people: the cameraman, the producer, and Martin Bashir. Bashir and Diana were left alone for an hour and a half before filming. Some claim they rehearsed, others that Bashir never gave her the questions in advance, but there are testimonies suggesting there was preparation. The princess herself reportedly said she had to get it perfect. Internal BBC documents state that she was informed of the general topics, but not the exact questions. The cameraman chose an informal space and soft lighting, seeking to create an atmosphere of intimate confession. At 9 in the morning, Bashir and Diana sat down. The camera started rolling. During the 90 minutes, the cameraman recalled a key moment. When asked about her alleged lover, James Hewitt, the princess became nervous. "Was your relationship more than a close friendship?" Bashir asked. Diana found the words. "Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him." The Panorama team anxiously awaited the call. Near midnight, Steve Hewlett called. They were done. They had the recording. The relief was immense. The next day, Burrell noticed something strange in the palace living room. The furniture had been moved. The princess told him she had been exercising with a friend. He didn't question her. With the recording in hand, editing was planned in an abandoned BBC building. But the editor of Panorama, Steve Hewlett, had second thoughts. He felt they were being watched. He decided to find another location. They called an editor for a job in Eastbourne without giving him details. They told him not to even tell his wife where he was going. He was handed a stack of tapes. When he put the first one in, there was Princess Diana looking him in the eye. It was a catalogue of long-suppressed feelings. A few days later, the interview was ready for the BBC executives. They traveled 2 hours to Eastbourne. No one had seen the footage. They didn't know what to expect. The tension in the room was extreme. As they watched, there were occasional gasps of astonishment. What they were seeing was groundbreaking, never seen before. The idea that the crown could skip over Charles was seismic. The interview could shake the very foundations of the monarchy. It was a threat without a doubt. BBC records revealed that almost all the material was used, but there is speculation about what was cut. There was a response about the Queen that was considered disparaging. Diana felt the Queen had not supported her, but a direct criticism of the monarch didn't seem right. The BBC never released that footage, but even without it, the interview was a bombshell. When the screening ended, the head of news told his colleague a premonitory line. "This program will mean either the end of the BBC or the end of the royal family. Perhaps both. And there's no doubt we have to broadcast it." It was agreed that the princess herself would break the news at the palace. She informed the Queen's secretary, Robert Fellows. Alarmed, he asked if it was about child poverty. She replied, "No, on Panorama." The phone started ringing. The week before the broadcast was insane. The world's press descended on London. November 20th, 1995. The day arrived. 23 million people tuned in to the interview. Diana was nervous, anxious about the reaction, but Martin Bashir assured her she had done the right thing. At Buckingham Palace, the press team watched in horror. They were astonished and angry. Diana was pointing the finger at the Prince of Wales. She singled out his team as the culprits of a campaign against her. But the prince, due to his position, could not defend himself. They couldn't believe she had made her private life public, her adultery, her love for Hewitt, and her feelings about Camilla. When asked if she had proof of her husband's affair, she replied coolly, "A woman's instinct is a very good one." It was one revelation after another. After the broadcast, the reaction was immediate. Friends of Prince Charles, like Nicholas Soames, called it appalling. They went so far as to say she was suffering from advanced paranoia. It was a common tactic to discredit a woman, to say she's crazy. It's a powerful accusation with no possible defense. The press, mostly hostile, focused on her confession of adultery. Diana was bothered that they zeroed in on James Hewitt. She had expected a more unanimously supportive reaction. She had the feeling the move had backfired. She wondered what the Queen would say. the answer came soon. The marital problems of Charles and Diana had cast a shadow over the royal family. The Queen decided to put an end to it. She advised them to divorce. In the interview, Diana had said she didn't want a divorce. Her greatest fear was that her children would be taken from her. The Queen sent a letter to both of them, urging them to begin the proceedings. That was the price she paid for the interview. Diana demolished the fairy tale fantasy that had been her prison. But on the streets, the story was different. The public supported her. People felt the prince had been cruel to her. The public loved her, especially for what she said about her mental health. She confessed to suffering from postpartum depression, a taboo subject. She always spoke from the heart. No other member of the royal family could speak with such honesty. She described the feeling of not being able to get out of bed, of feeling misunderstood. In the 90s, talking about mental health was a risk. For Diana to do so with such freedom was a huge step forward. Women around the world could identify with her, not as a princess, but as a mother. A few days later, she received some 6,000 letters of support. People would approach her on the street to thank her for her sincerity. Her act gave other women the strength to speak about their frustrations. The interview awakened an appetite for emotional transparency, an attitude that would soon find an echo in Tony Blair, who was looking to revolutionize British politics. In August 1996, the marriage came to an end. Diana felt defeated. She thought everything she had tried to achieve with the interview had failed. However, she soon discovered that her reputation had been transformed. The interview gave her a global platform. Suddenly, she was rubbing shoulders with world leaders like Bill Clinton. She had gained the credibility she so deeply craved. In this new world, she had an old ally, Martin Bashir. Their relationship didn't end with the interview. He visited her frequently, supporting her and helping with her speeches. It's ridiculous to think Bashir intimidated her. An analysis of her body language shows a woman in control of herself, her emotions, and the interview. Her steady gaze guided the conversation. Everything indicates there was some kind of prior agreement on the questions. This gave her time to craft perfect answers. The interview was not spontaneous. The journalist Richard Kay had met with her 5 months earlier. In his notes from June of '95, phrases that would later become famous already appeared. She was already talking about there being 3 of us in this marriage. She had a script prepared for months. Even her appearance was carefully studied. She used a white pencil under the rim of her eyes to give an appearance of sadness. It was a decision to present herself as a victim. It wasn't manipulation. It was survival. The interview wasn't just about settling scores. It was a way to promote herself for a new role. She declared she would like to be an ambassador for her country. Many in the establishment were terrified. The institution wanted to sideline her, not realizing her potential. In January 1997, she traveled to Angola to campaign for a ban on landmines. It was a direct consequence of what she proposed on Panorama. Some criticized her, comparing her to an emotional celebrity, but diplomats who worked with her saw her value. Luckily, someone in power believed in her potential. Tony Blair later admitted he wanted to give Diana an ambassadorial job. For the first time, she had friends in the government. It seemed like the triumph of everything she had sought with the interview. But the interview also unleashed other forces with terrible consequences. Panorama made her more famous than ever. The attention from the press and the public became insane. She herself complained about being constantly followed, but Diana's relationship with the press was complex. It was a double-edged sword. She trusted a small number of journalists like Richard Kay. Sometimes her location would be leaked to get a favorable photo. She herself admitted in the interview to being a free spirit. Sometimes she sought out the press, planted stories, cooperated with certain journalists. You can't be on both sides. In 1997, the pressure reached its limit. The press found out about her romance with Dodi Al-Fayed, and the hunt began. It was a media frenzy, a rolling snowball that was never going to stop. Giving an interview is like a religious confession. You know that everything you say will be recorded forever. After her death, the public reaction was massive. The interview played a fundamental role in that response. People who didn't know her personally remembered her words on Panorama. They felt a bond with her that they didn't have with any other member of the royal family. A single phrase came to define her, the Queen of Hearts. Although she thought it sounded cheesy, the public understood her story. She started as the obedient wife, became the hated woman, and ended as the self-realized woman. Her death cut that narrative short. Diana's interview marked a before and an after. Today, young people talk about mental health without taboos. Celebrities and even her own sons, William and Harry, speak openly about their emotions. They do it because she was the first. She did it in that interview. We live in a more transparent and emotionally connected world. All the things Diana was criticized for in 1995 are now the norm. She opened a door, and her death changed everything. Her legacy lives on, reminding us of the power of a voice that dared to break the silence. If you want to discover more stories that defined our era, subscribe and turn on notifications.